Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I don't know, do I sound old and tired? Do I sound beaten down? Because I'm 61 today. That's right, Darren. It's my birthday today. I am 61 years old. And I feel, I don't feel 61. I got to be honest about it. I feel probably 71, 81 maybe. I don't know. But happy birthday to me. We got a great show for you today. Both hours, Ask Me Anything of the Internet variety with Jimmy Akin. Of course, Jimmy Akin is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and the Jimmy Akin podcast. And sometimes feel like everyone's like, stop the introduction. We already know everything about Jimmy Akin. Like he's way more famouser than you. Just get him on. Jimmy Akin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Psych-Hellet. How are you doing today?
I am quite well. Thank you. Thank you very much. I assume that I'm quite well. I don't know that I'm quite well, but I assume. You never know when you're doing a pre-record.
At least it's good to have some level of self-awareness.
Yes.
So even if you're not totally sure, you know.
Exactly. Every Friday, a new episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World drops. Every Monday, a new episode of the Jimmy Akin podcast drops. Jimmy Akin also spends a lot of time keeping other people working in the podcast business by going on their podcast. So you can see Jimmy all over the internet. You can also check out his books. The Bible is a Catholic Book, A Daily Defense, 365 Days plus one to Becoming a Better Apologist. And many of the Fathers Know Best. Lots and lots of books from Jimmy Akin. So Jimmy's busy. Jimmy gets it done. How do you organize yourself for all that? Do you have like a spreadsheet that you that you keep a to-do list on or something? Like I do not think even on my best day I could be organized enough to do as much as you do.
Well, I have certain patterns that I work on that I just have memorized. I sometimes will use the notes function on my computer and my phone to keep track of to-dos, and I definitely have spreadsheets for the Jimmy Akin podcast and for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. But most of the time I also have a calendar, and I note when I need to turn things in on the calendar. And then I look at the calendar regularly to make sure I'm getting stuff done.
You're not one of those people who is like, I can't make sense of all this technology. You are actually kind of unusual for people in our age group. It's not you put it all together, you use it. It's not, you don't fuss about it. You can employ the technology to organize yourself.
Yeah, I know that some folks have particular self-organization apps that they use, but I've never really gone in for those. I've got the equivalent of calendars and to-do lists, and it all works for me.
And you can just tell your house to turn on the lights, and it turns on the lights. I remember the first time you did, I was like, well, I didn't even know we had that. I thought that was on Star Trek. I didn't know you could just go lights turn on, and then they turn on.
They also have them now to where you just walk into the room and they turn on. So they have that too.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, my neighbor has that across the street where any cat walks across his yard and he lights up the whole neighborhood. It's like all night you're like, oh, well, I guess there's a coyote. I don't know. But it's just some detector. He has got so sensitive in his house. I don't know maybe he's storing gold in there or something. I don't know. But he wakes up the whole neighborhood several times a night. All right. We got a lot of questions. We'll ask you about what's on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World this week in a little bit, but maybe we'll get to some questions before we do. I almost gave out the phone number. Nope, because all the questions are in from the internet. And the first one comes from Kevbert. Can we please, I don't know if Jimmy's in charge of this. Can we please have Christ in both body and blood? Will we ever see that again?
Well, Kevbert, I'm not sure where you're at, but there was in the Latin Rite of the Church, there was a permission to receive under most circumstances, unless it causes a problem, to receive communion under both kinds that was given some years ago, and that's been broadly implemented. During the COVID pandemic, there were some restrictions on that, but based on my experience, those restrictions are no longer enforced just about everywhere. If you're in a location where the precious blood is not being offered to the faithful, then that would seem to be something that's unique to your area. I'm not aware of that persist in, broadly speaking, in other areas. And so you might talk to your priest, and you might run it up to the bishop if needed, and say, hey, the pandemic's over. Can we start receiving under both kinds again?
All right, Kevbert. Thank you very much for the question. I do feel like in the last few years, a lot of people have asked that question. People are frustrated about that.
Especially a few years ago when we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic, absolutely. But based on my experience, it seems to be back to normal in most places.
All right, Kevbert, thank you. Champagne Future 5284 wants to know this, Jimmy. How do you respond to the idea that the elect are always a remnant and therefore a minority of the world's population, including among Christians?
Well, I'd question the premise. The elect, the term eklektos in Greek means chosen. And so the elect are those that God has chosen. And there are different schools of thought in different parts of Christendom about exactly what the elect are. But the idea that the chosen of God are always a minority of whatever group they're a member of, like a minority of Christians, that's not something that's taught in the New Testament. St. Paul does allude to the idea of a remnant in the book of Romans in chapters 9 through 11, where he's talking about how the fact that most Jews of his day did not believe in Jesus. And he's calling back to a passage in the Old Testament where Elijah was on the run from the prophets of Baal and the wicked leadership of the nation that was seeking his life. And he appealed to God and said, there's nobody who's faithful to you, and now they're trying to kill me, and you won't have any followers. And God says, don't worry, I've kept for myself a remnant of faithful Jews who have not bowed the knee to Baal and who have not kissed the idol of Baal. And so there are still a number of Jews that are out there that are faithful. And St. Paul applied that to his own day and said, even though most Jews have rejected Christ in his own day, there were still a remnant of faithful Jews, and that God thus preserved his chosen people through this period. But he's only talking about this period, and there's no statement here about, in the future, only a minority of Christians will be saved. That there's nothing like that. Paul assumes that basically all Christians are going to be saved, with maybe a few exceptions. The issue in how does God preserve the elect among Christians, but how does he preserve his elect among Jews? And so I would reject the premise that the elect are always a remnant. That's just something that's not taught in the New Testament.
All right, Champagne Future. I do like your name. Caviar Dreams. What was the thing that the guy used to say? Champagne? I can't remember. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Champagne Wishes and Caviar Dreams.
Champagne. Do you know what that is, Darren? No, you're too young. Champagne
Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Robin Leach, was it?
Good Lord, Jimmy. It's amazing. It's amazing. Out of the catalog, I would sit around all day going, I can't remember the phrase. And there used to be a guy that did a show. That would be that's how far I would get on that on my own.
I like the Dana Carvey impression. Assuming I'm right that the name was Robin Leach, Dana Carvey on Saturday Night Live would do a parody of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and he would introduce himself and say, I'm Robin Leach and I don't know why. and that got some bounce back from Robin Leach himself. He did the line, I'm Robin Leach and I don't know why.
Dana Carvey, a treasure, a national treasure, Dana Carvey. All right, well, we better take a quick break. He's a national treasure from Canada. Congratulations, Canada. You've produced a lot of very fine Americans. Is that probably not the way I should say that? You have produced a lot of very fine entertainers. All right, we'll take a quick break. Right back with more Jimmy Akin Ask Me Anything of the internet variety on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live with Jimmy Akin is coming right back.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
He is honored by the Church as one of the greatest enemies of clergy sexual abuse.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
In his time, St. Peter Damian fought against the many vices of contemporary clergy, especially sexual abuses among the clergy. In 1051, he wrote the Book of Gomorrah that is still considered essential reading for fighting abuse today. He died in 1072.
To find out more, visit EWTN.com and click on Catholicism.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I really do think Dana Carvey is one of the best people that came out of Saturday Night Live. He's always funny. Sometimes just outrageously funny.
Certainly, Enid Strict might disagree.
Okay, you're gonna have to help me, Jimmy.
Enid Strict is the name of the church lady.
Oh, that's the church lady. Oh, isn't that special?
Yeah. And she might take your opinion that Dana Carvey is just always funny and say, well, isn't that special? And I wonder who might have thought of that. Could it be Satan?
That was such a good bit. Yeah. No, nobody's doing. I don't know. I guess people are always like, it was better when I was a kid. It was all better when I was a kid. But I just don't understand it these days. All right, what's dropping this week, Friday, the 27th of June on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
So last week I looked at a pair of communication techniques known as facilitated communication and spelling to communicate that are sometimes used with children with classical autism who normally can't communicate. And the claim is that these methods enable them to communicate and just unlock their potential. And so I looked at that from a scientific perspective to see whether that was true. And this week we're taking the discussion one step further, because these children and the communication techniques that are reported to enable them to communicate what they think are the subject of the most popular podcast of 2025. It's been even bigger than Joe Rogan. And it's a podcast called The Telepathy Tapes. And it makes a bunch of startling claims, including all of these severely autistic children who normally can't communicate at all, or can't communicate in a normal way at all, are actually all telepathic savants. And they do lots of paranormal things. They, for example, have a telepathic chat room where lots of them get together and hang out. It's called The Hill. And they reportedly have lots of other psychic abilities in the community. And so the telepathy tapes rocketed to the top of the podcast charts. And I got lots of people asking me, so, what's Jimmy Akin's opinion on this? And it took me a while to listen to all of the telepathy tape podcast episodes and analyze them and then do an episode about them. But this Friday, that episode finally comes out, so you can find out what I think about the telepathy tapes. Ooh. And how impressed or not impressed I might be about their claims.
All right, that's dropping this Friday, but every Friday morning there's a new episode. And if you're just hearing about Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, you got a pile of fun in front of you. There's hundreds of episodes of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Check it out at mysterious.fm. Go to Jimmy's YouTube page, or just go wherever you get your podcasts. It is consistently among the most popular documentary podcasts out there. So Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. All right, let's back to the questions. This one comes from Seamus in Ireland. Seamus asks, he just says, describe the difference between the terms hermeneutics and exegesis.
Okay, so hermeneutics comes from a Greek word. In Greek, hermeneutes means an interpreter. And what hermeneutics has come to refer to are the set of principles that you use to interpret a text. Often this term is used in biblical studies, but it doesn't have to be biblical studies. When, for example, a court, let's say the U.S. Supreme Court, is interpreted in a document like, let's say, the U.S. Constitution, they have a set of hermeneutics or principles of interpretation that they use when they're reading that document. For example, a person here in America known as an originalist would say what we need to do in interpreting the Constitution is figure out what it originally meant in its historical context and then just apply the principles from it. And that's similar to how the Bible has classically been read, the idea being we need to figure out what it originally meant in its original context, and then we can apply the principles from there. Exegesis is related to hermeneutics, but it's a little bit different. An exegesis is a specific act of interpretation. It's not the principles that you use to do the interpretation, but it's the act of interpretation and the results of the interpretation. So if I'm looking at a particular text and I apply the principles to figure out what it means, I'm doing an act of exegesis by applying the principles of hermeneutics.
Wow.
And then when I announce my results and I say, this is what this text means, I've given you my exegesis of that text. Exegesis also comes from Greek roots. Ek X means out of, and so I'm trying to get the meaning out of the text. The reverse of that, even though it kind of breaks, it's not an ancient Greek word, but the reverse of getting meaning out of a text would be shoving meaning into a text that doesn't belong there. And in Greek, the preposition eis means into, and so shoving meaning into a text is sometimes called eisegesis. So exegesis is meant to take the meaning out of the text. Eisegesis shoves meaning into the text.
Seamus, thank you very much for the question. Next one comes from 1 Timothy 3:15. A Bible verse sent you a question, Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, the Bible says, my friend wants to know if one day drones could deliver the Eucharist to people who can't make it to Mass. I said this wouldn't be possible. What do you say? Thanks.
Well, I mean, it's obviously physically possible for drones to deliver the Eucharist to someone who, to take communion. That's something that is physically, able to happen. And so it could be hypothetically applied to someone who can't make it to Mass. Just like today, we have ministers of the Eucharist, whether they're ordinary ministers like priests and deacons, or whether they're extraordinary ministers who take communion to the sick. And so, you can have a package delivered by Walmart via drone. In fact, here in Northwest Arkansas, where Walmart is based, they have a drone delivery program. And that'll be rolling out to other Walmarts and other businesses across the country and across the world in short order, assuming it works out. So it's quite possible physically for this to happen. The question is, would the church deem it appropriate to do? And current liturgical law does not address drone delivery of the Eucharist one way or the other. But if you were to propose drone delivery of the consecrated host to someone, I suspect that there would be multiple objections raised. Like one of them would be, how safe are these drones? Because you don't want the Eucharist desecrated. And that's one reason it's been carried by people, so they can protect it. But that's potentially overcomable, just like self-driving cars in principle can be made safer than human-driven cars. You could have, drones that are designed to protect the Eucharist even better than people carrying the Eucharist. So I think that objection is overcomable. The more fundamental objection that I would see is that this looks like something the church does not endorse for the laity, and that is self-communion. It is now in the case of the celebrating priest, or if he has concelebrants, the concelebrating priests with him, they are allowed to, because certainly the celebrant has to, but celebrating and concelebrating priests are allowed to, after the consecration, pick up the Eucharist and take communion. And they are allowed to self-communicate, but that's it. Nobody else is allowed to self-communicate. So the church's liturgical documents make a point of, like, you can't just leave a chalice on a table and have people come up and pick up the chalice. Someone must hand it to them. Similarly, you can't just leave a ciborium of consecrated hosts on a table and have people come up and pick up a host and receive communion. Someone must hand them or place on their tongue the consecrated host. And so self-communication is viewed as not permissible for the laity, certainly not in the Latin Rite of the Church, presumably on the principle that we, as ordinary people, not as celebrants, but as ordinary people, we're to receive the Eucharist as a gift. And the way the church gives form to that principle is someone must give us the Eucharist for Holy Communion. And if you have a drone that's delivering it to you, and then let's say a little chamber opens up in the drone and there's the Eucharist and you pick it up and you receive communion, that would look more like picking the Eucharist up off a table and self-communicating, as opposed to someone handing you or placing the Eucharist on your tongue. And so I think that the more fundamental objection would be that this would violate the principle of no self-communion unless you're a concelebrant. And now that's not something the church has ruled to be of divine law. And so so I could imagine a scenario where they said, the drone is really just an implement of a person. I mean, someone has to put it in the put the Eucharist in the drone, and then the drone just transports it to you. And that's kind of like handing a chalice to someone so they can drink from it. You know, the chalice is a vessel that contains the Eucharist, and someone passes this to you, and then you can communicate from it. So I can imagine ways that people might end up endorsing the idea, but frankly, I don't foresee it happening anytime soon. I think the self-communication objection is going to be pretty powerful, and I wouldn't expect this. I wouldn't expect this.
1 Timothy, thank you very much. What a fascinating question. I very much appreciate it. We've got time to do Magikarp, which magic harp, I think, is the implication, or Magikarp. 2063 asks this.
Why can't it be a magi who is also a carp?
I guess it could be that. Yes. I was thinking
you could, the Magi were a Babylonian tribe, or not originally Babylonian, but they were a Persian tribe that were the priestly tribe, kind of like Levi was to Israel. And they were skilled in figuring out omens from the stars and stuff and what you'd see up in the sky. And so maybe you could take a carp and train, fish, train the carp in how to recognize celestial omens and, chant the origin of the gods. And it could be a magi too.
It's entirely possible. This is a tough one. I was thinking it was sort of a portmanteau of magic harp, but
it's got a K there, not an H.
I know, but sometimes it's just the sound. The portmanteau is made by combining the sounds, and magic harp sounds like how people say magic harp.
How many people actually say magic harp these days?
Now, I think there might have been one in the.
I know there's a magic flute. There's an opera about that.
That's so funny that you think of the opera and I think of of the Saturday morning TV show with Jimmy. What was his name? Puffin stuff. HR Puffin stuff.
Puffin stuff.
Yeah.
He's your friend when things get tough.
I know you know all the. Don't do it, Jimmy. I know you know all the words to the HR Puffin stuff song. I actually am kind of tempted to have you do it, but don't do it.
Okay. I'll do whatever you want. I'm a mechanical boy, like a mechanical toy.
Oh, I was enjoying it. I was kind of getting into it. By the way, if you're young and you have never been exposed to HR Puffin stuff and you don't know why people our age are weird, because this is what we watched on Saturday morning. Sid and Marty Krofft was a CIA conspiracy against the mind or something. I don't know. Sid and Marty Krofft were insane. I think they must have been insane. And on Saturday mornings, we would watch a TV show called HR Puffin Stuff or another called Lidsville. And what is Lidsville?
Oh, wow.
Has
nothing to do with drug paraphernalia, we promise.
But do look up on YouTube Lidsville and HR Puffin Stuff, and then you will understand what your elders went through. Some people had World War II. We had HR Puffin Stuff. We'll be right back and answer Magic Harp's question with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. Each Catholic is obliged to spread and defend the faith by word and deed. Well, we're here to help. Join special guests Chris Stefanik, Dr. David Anders, Father Jeff Kirby, and all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists this September 25th through 28th in beautiful San Diego for the Catholic Answers Conference. Our theme? Go make disciples. Enjoy 4 days of faith, fun, and fellowship. Use promo code EARLY to save $50 when you register today at CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Why do Catholics pray to dead people, bow to statues, venerate relics? And where do we find any of this stuff in the Bible? In the delightful book, The Saints Pray for You, Dr. Carla Broussard convincingly defends the ancient Christian belief rooted in Scripture that the saints care for us, that they're our allies. Order your copy of The Saints Pray for You today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I think we have established that if you were born in the 1960s, you had a weird childhood. You just did. HR Puffin Stuff. I don't know. Somehow in my mind that is connected to Puff the Magic Dragon. Did you listen to the song?
That was Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Yeah, but was that a song? Like, did you listen to that when you were a kid, or did you have?
Oh, everybody did.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, because we all listened to the same things.
Song.
Yeah, we didn't have. You just listened to whatever they put on the radio, and that Puff the Magic Dragon was what they put on the radio, Darren. That's what that happened to us as children. All right, Magic.
And there was a constant rumor that Puff the Magic Dragon was an allusion to marijuana usage. And I once saw a performance by Peter, Paul, and Mary, the group that made Puff the Magic Dragon a hit, in which they started singing the song and they alluded to that rumor and made the point really forcefully that this song is about nothing other than childhood whimsy and corresponding loss of innocence with increase in age.
Yeah, but this was another thing of our childhood was in addition to the fact that every show had to have an episode about quicksand, Every episode had to have a
hit on the head for amnesia.
Right, amnesia, evil twin. There were certain things that every show had to have at some point. I was terrified of quicksand as a child. And I don't even know if quicksand is a real thing. To this day, I don't know. It looked like oatmeal that people just sank in. But I don't. So it is. There is an actual thing called quicksand.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get pulled down into it and die. Is that real?
You can, but there are ways to avoid getting pulled down, like just float on your back.
Yeah, but this was the other thing that was an obsession of our childhood was songs had secret meanings that you had.
Well, sometimes they did.
I don't think John Lennon was telling the truth. I don't mean to disparage the memory of John Lennon, but I don't think he was telling the truth when he said "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" was not about LSD.
Well, he said that the way he got the idea for that song was that his son Julian drew a picture and showed it to him and said, "What is this a picture of?" And Julian Lennon said, "It's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." And I don't have reason to disbelieve that. I don't know that I fully believe it either. But there are other songs that clearly have double meanings in them and things like that.
Yeah.
There are also songs that they were trying to be explicit about their meaning, but they kind of failed because of some of the drug use they had going on in the day, like Inagata Devita.
Yeah, in the Garden of Eden.
Right. So the lyric is supposed to be, "In the Garden of Eden, don't you know that I love you, baby?"
Yeah.
But they were stoned enough when they recorded the song that it came out, "Inagata Devita, don't you know that I love you?"
Yeah. And Inagata Devita, when you're not stoned, doesn't mean anything. So nope. I think that John Lennon story about Julian Lennon is probably true, but I also think it didn't happen. I think it was John Lennon was on LSD. He thinks that happened, and then he wrote Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Let's get to Magic Carp's question. Magic Carp wants to know this. What's the Catholic position on the gift of tongues? Does it have to include unintelligible sounds, just real languages, or are Catholics free to have different opinions on this?
Catholics are free to have different opinions on this. Okay. There is no single Catholic teaching on this, and you will find Catholics who do have different opinions on this. If you're interested, for what it's worth, my opinion is that the phenomena spoken of in the Bible that are called speaking in tongues, both in the book of Acts and in Paul's writings, especially 1 Corinthians, are languages that are not naturally known by the person who speaks them, and they are normal human languages. There are other proposals that have been made, like these are maybe the tongues of angels, and Paul does in 1 Corinthians 13 refer to the tongues of angels, but I think that that's not to be taken literally. He's using that as kind of hyperbolic case, like even if I were to speak in the tongues of angels, he's not, and so that's not typical of what's happening. Furthermore, I don't think angels have literal languages because they don't have bodies, so they certainly don't have the physical organ of a tongue, and they correspondingly would not have the concept of language the way we have it, which is where you take your thought, which is at the base level expressed in what's sometimes referred to as mentalese, and then you turn that, or for most people it happens so naturally you're not even aware of the mentalese behind the linguistic expression. Like if I have the thought, "Oh, it's cold in here," that comes to me as phenomenologically, or what it's like to have that experience, it comes to me prepackaged in words. But really there is a mental articulation of it that is prior to words, and I have seen examples of that, typically in situations where I don't have time to express something in words. Like I remember driving down a curvy hill, with these switchbacks and stuff some years ago, and the vehicle I was driving suddenly started to slide. because of rocks on the road, and I could see, the next turn coming up and what I needed to do. And I didn't have time to articulate it in words, but in mentalese, I knew exactly what I needed to do.
Oh, yeah.
And so there are situations where you can become aware of your own mentalese, but normally it's so bound up in our language that when we think to ourselves, if we have an internal monologue, which most people do, then we don't really distinguish them. But with angels, since they don't have physical bodies, they're going to think in mentalese, and they're going to be telepathic creatures that communicate in mentalese. So they're not going to need languages the way we have them. So I think both because Paul is A, being hyperbolic, and B, because angels don't really have languages, certainly not ones that humans could pronounce.
No, sorry, Jimmy.
Other people have
you
tried.
froze for a quick second. You said,
yeah,
pronounce.
I know, and now we're calling attention to it.
Oh, I apologize for
that. That's okay. The other, so I don't think that those are good. I don't think that tongues of angels is a good explanation of what's going on in the Bible. Other people have tried to propose that this is a miracle of hearing. Because they'll say in Acts, when the apostles start speaking in tongues, you have this multi-ethnic crowd, and they say, aren't we hearing them all in our own languages? And they think, oh, it's a miracle of hearing. It's like whatever language they're speaking, you hear it in your own language. But that doesn't really fit the text. That's bad exegesis, to use a term we defined a little bit earlier. The crowd is speaking in the mode of a Greek chorus, where Luke presents the crowd as having one unified voice, as if they're one character and they're all saying the same words together. Are we not Cretans and Libyans and visitors from Rome, both Jewish and Greek? This is not what they were literally saying. It was a crowd of people. They weren't all saying the same thing. And Luke is just summarizing their experience. And their experience is they did hear these Galileans speaking in their own languages. And that's what this is. This is Galileans speaking in languages they did not naturally know. And that also fits the same. That's the best fit for the data in the Bible. Mm-hmm. So I'm convinced that what is happening in biblical tongues is you're speaking a language that you don't naturally know, and you don't even know what you're saying. That's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians that that you may need to pray for the gift of interpretation to be able to understand what you're saying. Now, there are a couple of terms that get used for this. Sometimes the two terms are glossolalia and xenoglossy. In Greek, glossa means tongue. And so it can either be the tongue in your mouth or it can be the language you're speaking. And glossolalia means speaking in tongues, by its etymology, whereas xeno means foreign. And so xenoglossy is speaking a foreign language. And the way these two terms have evolved, sometimes any kind of speaking in tongues is called glossolalia, and it would include the kind of tongues I've been talking about. But other times people distinguish these two, and they'll say, okay, glossolalia is what happens when someone is not speaking a real human language that they just don't know, whereas xenoglossy is speaking a real human language that they don't naturally know. And so you may encounter those two terms, and sometimes they're used in ways that distinguish them. What about the kind of speaking in tongues that goes on today? Well, there are reports of people speaking in foreign languages, and some of these are well grounded. Where you have a native speaker of whatever language is being spoken, and they can identify the language and translate what was being said. So there are reliable reports of glossolalia occurring. Most of the time, though, I don't think that a lot of it is real human languages. It's something else. And so the question would be, well, what else is it? I don't think it's languages of angels, because I don't think angels really have languages, certainly not ones we could pronounce. So one possibility is that it is someone doing what they think is speaking another language as a kind of private prayer language. That's a proposal that's often made in some Pentecostal and charismatic circles, that it's not a real language that anybody uses, but it's sort of a private prayer language for you, that the Holy Spirit is, you're having a spiritual experience and this private prayer language comes out, and that's what speaking in tongues is. Well, I wouldn't say that's what tongues is in the Bible. Of course, another possibility that a skeptic would propose is that you're just babbling and it doesn't really have any meaning at all. I tend not to take a hard position either way. Mm-hmm. A few years ago, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, as it's now called, put out a document on charismatic gifts called Juvenescit Ecclesia. And in this document, it pointed out that none of the lists of spiritual gifts in the New Testament are exhaustive, and that God can give new spiritual gifts to people at different periods in church history. So it's not like there's a single list and this is all God gives and all he's ever going to give. So I don't preclude the possibility that God could have someone speaking in a private prayer language today. I would say that's different than the biblical understanding of tongues. So it would be a different kind of tongues, but I don't rule it out. On the other hand, I also don't rule out the skeptical position that in some cases nothing supernatural is going on here, and the person is just generating speech content that sounds like what they've seen other people do when they are speaking in tongues, but that they're not actually, nothing supernatural is happening here. So I leave that question open. What I can say with confidence is that the best fit for the biblical understanding of speaking in tongues is it's a real human language that you don't naturally know. But I don't rule out other understandings of tongues that could be active today. But that's just my opinion.
Magic Carp, thank you very much. That'll take us to the break. We'll be right back with more Jimmy Akin Ask Me Anything internet questions right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
In Morse code, the sequence SOS is a distress call. It's been said that it stands for Save Our Souls. Well, right now our world is in big trouble, and we're putting out an SOS call for help. Will you answer that call? St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, has hundreds of teams who share the good news with souls who don't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to get involved.
The EWTN home video highlight for June is St. Joseph the Worker. Father Joseph Mary Wolfe explores the biblical image of St. Joseph, reflects upon the dignity of our own work, and examines the crucial role that fathers play in the family. Order your DVD at EWTNRC.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything. All the questions are in from the internet already. And Patrick wanted to know this one. Can we name our guardian angels or not?
Okay, so you sometimes hear people saying that we cannot name our guardian angels. And my response is, well, where do you find that as a rule? Because that's not in the Bible. That's not in canon law. So why can't you do that? Liberty is presumed. And so if you want to say you can't do something, you need to be able to find a law somewhere that says you can't do it. And this isn't a biblical law, and this isn't a canonical law. So my initial interpretation would be that this is just someone's opinion, and I tend not to cotton people imposing their opinions on others as if they're binding matters. If you want to say, I don't think that's a good idea, that's fine. That's an opinion, and you're not imposing it on anybody. But if you say you must not do this, well, then show me the law. And I've never seen anyone be able to do that. So at best, I would think this is an opinion. What I suspect is it's a misinterpretation of something that is actually out there in the literature. In the 20th century, there was a pious organization founded in Europe by a woman named Gabriela Bitterlich, called Opus Angelorum, which is Latin for work of the angels. And Gabriela Bitterlich was a visionary who had lots of visions involving guardian angels. And she would tell people, oh, the name of your guardian angel is this, and the name of your guardian angel is this. And she also said a number of other things about angels, and all this got percolated up to the Holy Office, which became the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which became the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. And they wanted to find a way to preserve the good that this pious association could do, but they wanted to detach it from some of the more problematic ideas that Mrs. Bitterlich had come up with. And one of the things they specified was that that people should no longer use the names for angels that Mrs. Bitterlich had given them. So if she told someone, I'll just make up a name, but if she told you, oh, Psychelet, your guardian angel's name is God is Mighty. Well, okay, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith would say, okay, nix on the God is Mighty Psychelet.
I see.
Because this comes from an unreliable private revelation. And so I think what may have happened is that various people got this basic story about Opus Angelorum and how you're not supposed to use Gabriela Bitterlich's angel names, and generalized it to say, oh, you must never give your guardian angel a name. So I'm not aware of any rule in this matter. Now, one thing I would say, so I don't have a problem if you want to give your guardian angel a nickname, like Psychelet, if it helps your devotion to the guardian angels, including your own. If you want to give him a nickname, let's say Bob, I don't have a problem if you say, Bob, please help me out in the situation. What I wouldn't do is think that that's literally your guardian angel's name. I would recognize it as a nickname that you gave your guardian angel personally, but it's not your guardian angel's real name. In fact, per my previous comments about angels not having language the way we do, I suspect angels don't have names the way that we do. They just think of another angel, and all the other angels know who they're thinking about. Mm-hmm. So I think the names that angels are given in Scripture, like Michael and Gabriel, which respectively mean, Michael means who is like God, the implied answer being nobody's like God, and Gabriel meaning God is a mighty man or God is a warrior, I was thinking, do I need to flip that around? But yeah, it works that way. Those are given to the angels, not because the angels need them to identify each other, but because we need them to identify which angel are we talking about. And so I think the angel names we find in Scripture are meant to benefit us, not because the angels use them amongst themselves. But that's what I'd have to say about angel naming.
Patrick, thanks very much. All right, let's go to maybe this comes from a computer. I don't know, because the name is MMVR 2680. That sounds like
It's almost a Roman numeral. Except
the
because
R.
MM and V, that would be 2005, but it's got that R in there, and R is not a number in the Roman system.
I'm just going to go with the most likely thing then, that this is an android.
Okay.
Thank you, MMVR 2680 for the question. Lately, a part of the gospel reading struck me. That's good. That's good. That's good when that happens. That means you're reading the gospel. Why did Jesus ask Peter if he loved him more than the other apostles? It's the more than the others that caught my attention. Wasn't John the one who loved him more or best?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. The first, so let's deal with John, the beloved disciple, assuming that John is the beloved disciple. There are other arguments about who the beloved disciple may have been because he doesn't name himself in the gospel. But we'll stick for the moment with the idea it was somebody named John. What we're told is not that John loves Jesus more than the others, but that Jesus loves John in a special sense. And it's not even clear to biblical scholars that Jesus loves John more than he loves other people. I mean, he died for everybody. So Jesus loves everybody. And one proposed interpretation of the Gospel of John is that the reason that the beloved disciple identifies himself as beloved of Jesus is not to say he loved me more than the others, but to say he loved me, and he's kind of a surrogate for all of us. And so we're all the beloved disciple. Jesus loves all of us, and John is pointing that out in his gospel, and he's inviting us to kind of see Jesus through his eyes, because he's a disciple that Jesus loved. I'm a disciple that Jesus loved, and so I can kind of I take the place of the beloved disciple in witnessing what happens in Jesus's ministry, since the Gospel of John is an eyewitness account. And so he's inviting us on this view to think about the fact that we're all beloved of Jesus. On the other hand, that may not be the case. That's one proposal, but it's not the only proposal. It's also proposed that although Jesus loves everybody, that he may have had a special affection for this particular disciple. But that's what we're told, is that Jesus loves this disciple. We're not told he loves him the most, although he may have a special affection for him, but we're not told that the reverse is true, that John loves Jesus more than the other disciples do. That's a question that is not addressed. And so consequently, we need to be cautious here. And I would say that that of itself will resolve the tension between the two ideas that MMRV 2680 has been wondering about, because I would say it is not established that John loved Jesus more than the other disciples did.
Okay.
So why? But we can go further and answer, well, why does Jesus ask Peter, do you love me? This is in John 21, if you want to look it up. Why do you love me more than these? And the more than these is, to my mind, most likely interpreted as a reference to the disciples who are present, and more the other disciples in general. The reason I say that is because there have been some Bible interpreters who have claimed he's referring not to the other disciples, but to the fishing life. Do you love me more than going out on the Sea of Galilee and catching fish and stuff like that? Well, okay, I can kind of see where they're going with that interpretation, but the problem is, if you read the verse immediately before where Jesus asks the question, and you're looking for a referent for the pronoun these, it refers to the disciples. Okay. And so the word disciples appears just before this question gets asked. And so just reading the text naturally, it seems to me the disciples are the referent for the pronoun these. And you even then could read this one of two ways. But I think the basic reason that Jesus is doing this is because he's restoring Peter to his office as Pope. He's undoing the three denials. And so he's putting the other apostles, the other disciples in the picture as part of the sheep that Peter is being called to shepherd. And so that's why he asked him this question. There's more to say about that, but here comes the hard break.
And we gotta take it. That's what hard means in this case. MMVR 2680. I'm glad to see that droids are reading the Bible. Thank you very much for the question. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and he will continue to be our guest next hour. And we will continue with Ask Me Anything from the Internet for Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kelly, your host. Very happy to be here with you because Jimmy Akin's here, and we're having fun doing Ask Me Anything. Also, just because of some conversation that happened in the first hour, reminiscing about what it was like to be a child in the 70s. Man, it was crazy. I had forgotten about click-clacks, Jimmy.
Yeah, we should explain just before we came back on, we were talking about wild stuff from the 70s, and Cy mentioned avocado-colored household appliances. Yeah. And I mentioned all the dangerous games that we had that were then pulled off the market. And we both at the same time said lawn darts, which were these, they were about a foot long, as I recall, and they had a metal core with plastic fins, and you'd throw them and aim at targets on the lawn. But
they were knives for children to throw at each other. It was, that's what it was.
Yeah. And I think adults played lawn darts too, but when you get kids running around and you're throwing pointed metal objects, you know, it's like, this is like a little game of javelins with children running around. But also click-clacks. What a click-clack was, it was kind of like a bolo, but there were two plastic spheres, hard plastic, that were connected by a cord, and you'd hold the cord in the middle and you'd swing it back and forth so that the two plastic spheres would clack into each other twice with each swing. And so you'd be going clack, 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 clack. And okay, this is a noisemaker, which is going to annoy parents, but kids love noisemakers.
Yeah.
But the real problem is you're going to hit someone with those hard plastic spheres. You may hit yourself in the head. You may hit another child. You might deliberately throw it at another child to hit them. So,
well, there is some kind
lots of dangerous toys.
I think that it's Australians that there's some kind of weapon where they put two balls on the end of a string and you throw it. Oh, that's a bolo. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, of course, that's what we tried to do. We'd be like, hey, run down the street and I'll try to see if I can get these around your legs. So children are knocking each other's brains out with heavy plastic balls. The 70s was awesome. It was awesome. After this, we'll throw lawn darts at each other. Amazing, amazing time. But then the fun thing was then you could get in the station wagon with no seatbelts and just play sports in the back of the car. Just
in the back of the
rumble
car,
around in the back of the car while you went on a drive with no air conditioning.
Did that all the time. I should correct myself. It's not bolos, but bolas that are the throwing weapon that you could use to, like, if you're a gaucho in South America, you could, catch an animal by throwing a bola at it. We also had another thing that I really loved. Now, we had some toys that got taken off the market that I don't think they needed to. Like, there was one toy that I really liked that was, it was called a thing maker. And what it was it was a little light bulb powered oven, basically. They had the Easy Bake oven for girls, and they'd make little things that were.
Was that for girls? I was not aware of that.
Well,
I love Easy Bake oven. All right, go ahead.
Primarily for girls, but they also had an equivalent for boys or primarily for boys, where you could take these metal trays and pour goop in them, and they had these bottles of goop. And then you'd put that into the thing maker, and it would heat it up and cause the goop to solidify as this kind of rubber. And you'd make these little creatures. And they had, like, Creeple People was one of them. And it was these little creepy looking characters that you could make. And I loved playing with the thing maker and the creepy crawlers and Creeple People that I made with it. But because those little metal trays got hot, they ended up taking it off the market. And I think that was maybe a little, I mean, it's not meant for 2-year-olds or 4-year-olds, but I think older children could play with that without it being a problem. Once you learn, you got to have a little patience and restraint while it cools down.
Yeah.
They also
children can deal with heat. Like sometimes for all of human history, children have been dealing with fire and heat. Like if you're responsible, they can deal with it.
How are they going to learn if they don't burn their fingers once in a while?
Right.
There also was another that I really liked that this would have been the late 60s or very, very early 70s, but there was a kind of plastic goop. It was thicker than the goop you'd use with the thing maker, which had a consistency before it was baked, kind of like glue.
Yeah. And then you make a frog or something out of it. You'd be all kinds of cool stuff.
little monster,
Right.
something. But there was another kind of goop that came in a tube, and this goop was thicker and more rubbery just out of the tube. And it was all kinds of different psychedelic colors. And what you do is you'd squeeze out a little bit of this goop onto the end of a straw, and then you'd take the straw and blow into it, and the goop would inflate, and you would have your own custom built balloon with an irregular shape and all these psychedelic swirly colors on it. And then you pinch it off and you could play with your balloon. And I thought that was really cool too, but apparently the goop was toxic or something, the way they made it.
Get over it. Sorry.
Yeah. And so they ended up pulling it off the market, but I thought it was fun.
Yeah. And did you ever get the opportunity as a child to make a tie-dye shirt? This was also a big thing. You get magically a white T-shirt turns into an actual fashion statement. Like it was a wonderful adventure making the tie-dye T-shirt.
I didn't have that as a child. My parents were a little too square for that.
Oh yeah.
But I did. I do actually have a tie-dye shirt now, but these are ones I bought, not ones I made. I first got a tie-dye shirt because I thought they were looking interesting, but I first got one when I was in grad school in college. At least this is the first one I remember. And I had some toe surgery for an ingrown toenail, and I needed to wear Birkenstock sandals after the toe surgery until my toe healed. But no, there's a method to my madness, because in grad school I was assigned as a teaching assistant, and I had longish hair and I had a beard. It wasn't as long as it is now, but I had longish hair and a beard, and I was assigned as a teaching assistant in grad school in the philosophy department, and so I was assigned to teach Introduction to Philosophy. And I did very well at it. I had my faculty, student evaluations were top of the department, and they actually gave me an award for teaching. And I remember one day, one of my fellow grad students, who was also a teaching assistant, he couldn't make it to one of his classes and asked me to sub for him. And he was not the clearest communicator. And so I went and I taught his class, and this was towards the beginning of the semester. And I had like several students come up to me after the class eagerly saying, "Are you our new instructor now?"
We understood you.
Sorry, I'm just filling in. So, but one of the challenges, because I wanted, as part of this course to do Intro to Philosophy, I wanted to cover philosophy of religion. And I wanted, and this is a state school, this was University of Arkansas, so this is not a religious school. And I wanted to be able to present religious content in a way that would not trip sensitivities for students that were, hostile to Christianity or things like that, because young people. And so what I did was I got out my Birkenstock sandals from my toe surgery, and I bought a tie-dye T-shirt, and I put on the tie-dye T-shirt, and then I go in and teach philosophy of religion, and I can talk about religion without looking like Jerry Falwell. And it worked.
Yeah. There are advantages to being a hippie. You can talk about stuff that the guy with the tie on can't talk about. Let's take a break. The 70s was both worse then, and now I'm recalling better than people remember it. It had some.
It was mixed.
It was a real mix. Not so good for Patty Hearst, but for the rest of us, there was click-clacks. We'll be right back with more Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
We'll be right back with more great answers from Jimmy today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
Are you looking to study Catholic theology in a formal way with the guidance of faithful scholars? Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by the Augustine Institute. offering master's degrees in theology, pastoral theology, and Catholic education with flexible study options on campus, online, or both. The Augustine Institute equips students to serve Christ and His Church in schools, parishes, dioceses, apostolates, and the home. Learn more today at augustine.edu.
The EWTN On-Demand platform features 50 new podcasts every week, as well as an ever-expanding library of audio and video content. For Catholics who want to learn more about their faith, simply using their mobile device, computer, or TV. Your favorite EWTN programs are available 24/7. Visit EWTN.com and click On Demand. EWTN is the global Catholic network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. Ariel wants to know this, Jimmy. Do you prefer the minimal facts approach or the maximal facts approach to defending the resurrection of Jesus?
Okay, so I guess first I should explain what those are for folks who may not be familiar. There have been a variety of approaches to defending the idea that Jesus rose from the dead in Christian apologetics down through the years, and I mean hundreds of years. And one approach that became common in the late 20th century is known as the minimal facts approach. It was popularized, for example, by an apologist who's still with us named Gary Habermas. And in this approach, what you do is you start with only a very few number of claims, and like 4 or something, that the early Christians that are agreed upon by everybody, like Jesus died and Jesus was buried and the tomb was found empty and Jesus' disciples reported him appearing to them, and maybe 1 or 2 others. But it's easy to document these claims from our very earliest sources, like one passage that gets appealed to in particular is 1 Corinthians 15, where St. Paul has a creedal statement that talks about Jesus's post-resurrection appearances, and and because 1 Corinthians was written about AD 53, this is within 20 years of the crucifixion. And because this is a creedal statement, it's something Paul didn't invent. He modifies it a little. He adds himself on at the end. But it's clear that Paul is quoting pre-existent material here. So that pre-existent material has to be formulated even earlier in that 20-year period. And so there's not a lot of time for distortion to enter the Christian message. And so what you do with the minimal facts approach is you say, well, here are these very few facts that even secular scholars agree to, and we can make an argument that the best explanation for these minimal facts is that Jesus, in fact, rose from the dead. As an alternative, there's sort of the maximal facts approach, where you just pull in all kinds of evidence from everywhere, and you don't focus in particular on these core facts. Well, I tend to prefer something that's sort of a hybrid, that's in the middle. One of my critiques of the minimal facts approach is I think it's a little too minimal. I think that that it's missed, in fact, one of the core facts that is very relevant to the question of did Jesus rise from the dead. And that's another claim that's very easy to document and is clearly very early. And it's the fact that Jesus ascended into heaven, because that's the explanation for why you can't just go to Jerusalem and walk down the street and meet Jesus today if you're living in the first century. It's because he's not on earth anymore. He ascended into heaven. And this was witnessed by his disciples, and they preached this, and this is a very early component of the Christian message. And I think that when you add this, it helps you eliminate certain alternatives to the resurrection. Because, like, for example, one theory that's proposed. So what you do in all of these arguments is you make a list of alternative explanations to Jesus being raised, and then you go down that list and evaluate how plausible they all are. Well, one proposal would be, it's what's known as the swoon hypothesis. The idea is that Jesus didn't die on the cross, that he just passed out and swooned on the cross, and they buried him thinking he was dead when really he wasn't dead. And then he gets to rest in the tomb for a few days and recuperates and thinks he's died and been resurrected, and all of the other disciples think the same thing when he explains it to them. So that's the swoon theory. Now you can then argue why, without the ascension, you can argue, well, that's implausible for these reasons. Romans really knew how to kill you with crucifixion, and that wouldn't explain how Jesus got past the rock that was sealing his tomb, and he would be weak and in really bad health even if this theory were true. And those are all fine. But one of the things that I think is a clincher when you bring in my additional core fact is even if Jesus had swooned on the cross, that wouldn't let him fly. Yeah. And so if this is a core part of the Christian message, you can just eliminate the swoon theory. If the apostles were really preaching, we saw him ascend into heaven, that's a clincher on the swoon theory and on several other theories. So I think the minimal facts approach needs to incorporate this additional agreed upon fact that even secular scholars will admit, yeah, Jesus' disciples preached that he had ascended to heaven. The other criticism that I'd have is I don't think you can do it with just the minimal facts. I think you need, in order to mount a robust defense of the resurrection, I think you need to appeal to what the gospel accounts say, like talking about the fact that the grave was guarded, that there was a guard over the stone, which is only mentioned in Matthew, and talking about, the reactions that the disciples had when there were the reports of Jesus, how they didn't immediately leap to the conclusion he's resurrected. In fact, that was like their third interpretation. Their first interpretation was somebody stole the body. Their second interpretation, when he actually showed up and they could see he's here, was we're looking at a ghost. This is an apparition of a ghost. And then when he demonstrates his physicality to them, their third fallback interpretation is, I guess he got raised from the dead. So that hesitancy to believe that he's raised shows that they were not in a, oh boy, he's going to come back any minute, where they might imagine it. This is a conclusion they came to reluctantly. And so I think in order to mount a robust defense, you need to be able to appeal to some of these facts from the Gospels. So what I do when I argue for the resurrection of Jesus is I start with a minimal facts approach, including my additional minimal fact of the ascension. And then I make the list, and then I go through the list of alternatives, but I allow myself to appeal to additional things in the Gospels that aren't on the initial list of core facts. So I use a kind of hybrid approach between minimal and maximal facts.
All right. Thank you very much, Ariel, for the question. We've got time for another question before we have to take a break. So we'll go to Ghetto Mark 50, wants to know this. Do you know anything about the morality of reality shifting? That is, shifting the consciousness to a different version of reality.
Well, so I guess the first thing I'd say is you can take the principles of Catholic moral theology and apply them to basically any scenario, no matter how weird it is. That's one of the things I do on the Weird Question shows that we do every couple of months. In terms of reality shifting, defined as shifting your consciousness from one version of reality to another, that's a phenomenon that I don't know that we have any evidence for. We don't have evidence that there are different versions of reality. We have evidence of one version of reality, which you can imagine as a timeline that we're traveling down. And we know that exists. At least we have good evidence that it exists. But If people are talking about alternate timelines that say branch off from this one, we don't have any evidence that they're real. Now, there are scientists who talk about this as a possibility that, with every quantum event that occurs, the timeline splits. And so one set of options, the fancy word is decoheres. One option decoheres with ours, one timeline branches off. It's no longer part of where we are in this branch and timeline structure, but there's no way to test this. And with no way to test it, that means that this is not actually a scientific proposal. It's a metaphysical speculation. Because one of the things about science is, in order for something to qualify as an item of science, you have to be able to test it in some way. Classically, according to Karl Popper, you need to be able to falsify it. There are counter arguments to that, but you do need to, in some way, be able to see how we could test it. And right now, there's no way to test for the existence of alternate timelines. So I would say this is a metaphysical speculation, but it's not something we have confidence in. And so if other timelines don't exist, then there's no way to shift your consciousness to them. And reality shifting would not be possible. On the other hand, suppose that we are in a branch and timeline system and other timelines are real and we don't have any evidence for it, but suppose they are real. Well, in that case, reality shifting could potentially work. It might or might not, but it could hypothetically work. The question one of the questions I would have is what's happening with your consciousness when you come to a decision point and the timeline branches? How do you know your consciousness doesn't itself branch? So, in one timeline, you decide, I'm going to have pizza tonight, and you go down the pizza timeline. In the other branch, you decide, I'm going to have pasta tonight. Let's say you've gone to an Italian restaurant. You decide, I'm going to have pasta tonight, and you go down the pasta timeline. How do you know your consciousness isn't following both of those timelines? There's now two versions of your consciousness. Well, in that case, how would you shift from one timeline to another? It's just your consciousness just automatically branches like everything else. And so it would be difficult to see how that happens, how you would shift from one version of reality to another. Maybe you branch just like everything else does. On the other hand, let's suppose that somehow you do branch. Not that you do branch, but somehow you can shift from one version of reality to another. Let's suppose there's only one version of your consciousness and it travels down whatever branch you choose. So if you choose to order pizza, your consciousness goes down the pizza timeline. If you choose pasta, your consciousness goes down the pasta timeline. Well, in that case, you're kind of doing reality shifting. You're deciding which version of reality you're going to be in. And that would just be something that happens automatically all the time. These other timelines, to me, if they don't have your consciousness in them, they would seem to be less than fully real timelines, but still you could kind of call this reality shifting. What I think Ghetto Mark 50 is asking about, though, is probably something more dramatic. Let's suppose you chose to have pizza and you then regretted that. So you went down the pizza timeline and then you regretted that choice and said, man, I wish I had pasta instead. And so you somehow jump your consciousness from the pizza timeline that you're on to the pasta timeline that you're on, that you didn't initially go down. Well, I don't know that that's possible. And if it's not possible, then there's no moral question here. So let's suppose it's possible. Well, in that case, I'd want to know, what are you doing to the version of you, if there was one, that originally went down this timeline? Are you displacing him? If that's the case, then I would say you're doing something immoral by displacing someone who was already here, who made the choice to have pasta, and now you're kicking him out. On the other hand, consciousness might not work that way. You might just merge. and it's another version of you, and you're not harming anybody else, and you're not harming you. You're not displacing the other you. You're just becoming the other you. In that case, this would be a phenomenon that largely occurs below our level of awareness, but I would say that's at least arguably moral if you're not doing any harm to yourself or others. So I'd have to know more about how the system is specified to work in order to comment further. But my sense is that this is all very speculative. We don't have evidence for this. And there are ways in which it could be both moral or immoral, depending on how the system is set up.
Get a Mark. Thanks very much for the question. Lots more questions to come. Jimmy Akin is our guest. All the questions are in. They're from the internet because it's an internet version of Ask Me Anything. More right after this on Catholic Answers Live. When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers Monthly Giving Club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. He's the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where this week's episode, a new episode drops each Friday morning. This week's episode will be on the telepathy tapes, which, Jimmy, you were saying in 2025 became the most popular podcast in the world. So you're going to respond to that.
At least for a time.
Mm-hmm. Check it out at mysterious.fm or wherever you get your podcasts, or at Jimmy Akin's YouTube channel. Back to the questions we go. Jake O'Block M wants to know this. He says, "Hi, Jimmy. Like you, I changed my name, my surname in my case. I know you decided to change yours back to honor your father. How can I discern whether I have dishonored my father in changing my surname, and if so, whether I ought to change it back? Thanks so much for your brilliant work, smiley face."
Well, thank you, Jake. I guess first I'll explain what happened with me, and then we'll look at your case and the principles that might apply to it. So I was born as a junior. My father's name was Jimmy Howard Akin, and my name is Jimmy Howard Akin. And that's my legal name on my birth certificate. And then I grew up, and I reached a certain point in my development in early adulthood where I didn't want to be known as Jimmy because I wanted to prove my adulthood. And so since Jimmy is a diminutive, I didn't want to be referred to by diminutive anymore. So I started going by James, which is the root that that Jimmy comes from. I mean, well, the English root. There are even earlier roots. It goes back to the Hebrew Yakub, and beyond that, I don't know that we can trace it. But I started going by James. Also, people would have thought it was really weird if I'd started going by Yakub. But I started going by James, and eventually I decided to legally change my name so that I wouldn't have this disconnect between people calling me James and what it said on my driver's license and when I needed to sign legal documents and so forth. So I went through the procedure of changing my name here in Arkansas, and then I moved out to California, and I decided, I'm older now. I don't need to prove I'm a man. I think that's kind of done. So I thought, my name Jimmy is kind of distinctive. It's different than, other people named James, and it is my father's name. And I may have, kind of hurt him a little bit by rejecting that. And so I thought, I'm going to change it back. And I'll honor my father in that way by re-embracing this name. And so I was in California at the time. And so I went through the procedure in California of changing my name, my legal name, from Jimmy back to James. So now I have, again, the name that is on my birth certificate. Well, that's what happened. And my father was indeed pleased. That's what happened in my case. But to what extent do similar considerations apply in yours? Well, Jake says, and I'm not, even though he's got a name here, I assume it's a YouTube name, not his legal one. So I don't know exactly what Jake's legal name is, but he says he changed his surname, meaning his family name, not his first name. And so in a way, that's a little less of a direct could be perceived as less of a direct slight to your father than what I did, because I left my my surname Akin the same. It's not like I was rejecting my family. I changed my first name that was the same as my father's name that he himself and with my mom had given me. And so that could be more easily taken as a personal slight than another person changing their name when they weren't directly named after their father. So your situation may not come across as the same kind of slight that mine could have. Now, ultimately, my father accepted it. He didn't complain about me changing my name, but I still realized he could, on some level, take this as a slight. On the other hand, he might not have, because he might have said, I was named Jimmy too, and I kind of would have preferred being called James. That's something I don't recall us ever discussing. But that's what I did, and the same thing might not apply to you, in that it's not, you're changing your surname might not be taken as a direct slight to your father. On the other hand, it could be taken as a slight of a different kind, namely rejecting the entire family, not just your father, but everybody else too. So if your legal name was, say, Smith, and you changed it to Jones, it's like, why don't you want to be part of the Smith family anymore? Why do you want to change that? And it could be taken as a slight to even more of your family members. On the other hand, there can be good reasons to change one's surname. And I'll give an extreme example here, because extreme examples help make the point clear. Charles Manson, the famous American mass murder guru, had 3 children that we know about during his life. And one of them, his first son, was named Charles Manson Jr. And he had this long before he was a murderer, and like 13 years before he committed the murder crimes or had them committed in 1969. His first son was born in like 1956. And so you have this kid named Charles Manson Jr. And then when he's 13, his dad has become a hippie cult leader who is murdering people. And he becomes the most famous mass murderer in America. And that can cause problems for you if you're named after him. if you're Charles Manson Jr. and suddenly someone named Charles Manson becomes famous, or rather infamous, in America for killing people, that's going to cause you problems. And you may not want to be haunted with those problems for your entire life. And so Charles Manson Jr. did end up changing his name. So he included his surname. I'm trying to think of exactly what he changed it to. Jay White, that's it. He changed his name to Jay White. And certainly I can understand why, if Charles Manson's your dad, you don't want to be called Charles Manson Jr. anymore. You want to be called something else like Jay White. And so I think that's an entirely understandable situation where changing the surname is justified. So I don't know what your situation is, Jake. I don't know, are there reasons why you would want to change it? Some names are, names do have social resonances, even if they're not Manson. They can have social resonances that can be undesirable. And throughout history, I mean, last names are not permanent historically. People do change their names. When a lot of people immigrated to America, they would change their family name either because it was difficult for Americans to pronounce, or because they'd get social advantages if they made little tweaks and made it more familiar. And that's okay. That wasn't perceived as a rejection of the family. It was just, we're doing something different to try to get some advantage here. And I can imagine there are certain names that have acquired problematic resonances, like the name Lipschitz in contemporary English is, it has negative social resonances. And so if a family named Lipschitz wanted to change their family name, I totally understand that. I'm not going to complain about it. So I would say that I can't directly answer your question. I wouldn't view it so much as a slight on your father, but as a potential slight to the family. And if you had good reasons for changing it, and then that's fine. You can leave it the way it is. On the other hand, if you conclude you didn't have good reasons for it, and if it would please your family to change it back, and if it wouldn't cause you a bunch of additional problems, then I'd probably go ahead and change it back. But that's a major decision. If everybody in your life right now knows you as Jones rather than Smith, and you start going to them telling them, oh, I changed my name to Smith now, please call me Jake Smith, that's going to cause you a bunch of headaches. And so you need to think carefully about the balance of goods here, both the costs and the benefits in this situation. And if the benefits outweigh the costs, then changing your name would be a great thing to do. On the other hand, if the costs would outweigh the benefits, then leaving your name would be the best thing to do. So ultimately, it's a prudential call, it's a judgment call, and there's no one clear right answer either way, but those are the principles that I'd bring to bear on making the decision.
Jake, that brings us to the break. So thank you very much for the question. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin internet version right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the biggest mistakes a Christian can make is to try to do good without God's help. St. Therese said, when we trust only ourselves and not God, our soul becomes incapable of virtue. Her remedy? Works of charity. And the greatest work of charity is to share the gospel. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we encourage you to share the gospel with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives. The year was 2009. Pope Benedict XVI awards EWTN Fondress, Mother Angelica, and Deacon Bill Steltemeyer the Cross of Honor for distinguished service to the Church. It is the highest honor that the Pope can bestow upon laity and religious.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Speaking of names, user PD1QC3YQ8F wants to know this, Jimmy. That is a heck of a name. I'll just call you user. And here's the question. Guns! Exclamation point. Is it okay to like them and use them? For example, for self-defense and use of lethal force.
Okay, so let's take these questions in reverse order. Well, is it okay to use a gun or anything else for lethal force? Well, that's going to depend on if the lethal force is justified. And there are different standards to evaluate that by depending on who you're planning on killing. If you're planning on killing an animal, then animals do not have intrinsic rights to life. And so if you say want to go hunting for deer meat so you can get some venison, well, okay, that's morally in principle okay. Deer do not have a right to life. And so you can in principle hunt them, just like you could, you could eat cow meat or pig meat or chicken meat or whatever. It could be deer meat. And if the easiest way to get deer meat is to go hunting, well, you can go hunting. On the other hand, humans do have a right to life. And so you can't just hunt humans, although I know that they say that man is the most dangerous game. That's a famous short story. But you can't ethically hunt humans, not using lethal force. I mean, you can play laser tag or something, but
lawn darts.
Well, lawn darts is another issue.
It's different. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have contributed. I apologize.
No, that's okay. But you can't use guns for lethal force on humans without special justification, like it's a home invader, or you're fighting in a war and the other guy is the bad guy. Or you're doing proxy self-defense. Let's say someone is attacking some innocents and they are not armed, but you are armed. You could use potentially lethal force morally to save innocent life. So, and that also applies to the second part of the question, which was using guns for self-defense. Yeah, using guns or any other tool for self-defense is in principle morally justified, as long as you're using it in a situation where the use to which you are putting the tool is morally acceptable. And so you can use guns for intimidation purposes, or you can use guns for lethal purposes with other humans if you're in a situation where that will either be self-defense or proxy self-defense. So that's kind of the second two parts of the question. But now let's back up and get to the first part. That deals with using guns. Is it okay to like them? Well, why wouldn't it be okay? They're tools. And one can admire and like tools. You could admire a well-made kitchen knife. You could admire I've got a multi-screwdriver where you just change the tip on it and you press the button and it automatically screws and unscrews. And it's like, I admire my screwdriver. That's cool. We didn't have those when I was a kid. You can admire any tool, either in terms of its functionality or its beauty or its ease of use or anything like that. And so merely appreciating a tool is not a problem in principle. And some people may have special interest in tools, like some people may want to collect knives. Some people may want to collect guns and appreciate different tools in the same category for different qualities. Like, I like this knife because it's like this. I like this other knife because it's like this. I like this screwdriver because it's like this. I like this other screwdriver because it's like that. And I like this gun for this reason and this other gun for this other reason. So I know people have all kinds of feelings about guns, but fundamentally they are tools. They have legitimate uses, and it's okay to appreciate them and use them in the situations in which the usage is legitimate. So I would say, you need to keep things in balance. Like you wouldn't want to buy, let's say you're a gun collector. Well, that's puts you in the same boat as a collector of anything. You don't want to devote such attention to your collection that you end up robbing other, responsibilities of the attention they need. Like, let's say you've got a family and you end up spending all your money on collecting guns and depriving your family of help that they need. Well, that would be the equivalent of saying, I want to collect, Smurf toys, and I spend all my money on collecting Smurf toys and neglecting my family responsibilities. Well, that'd be bad. But there's nothing wrong with appreciating Smurf toys in and of themselves, and there's nothing wrong with appreciating guns in and of themselves.
Thanks, user PD1QC3YQ8F. Appreciate the question. The next question comes from Suzanne. Strangely non-exotic name after that other one. Suzanne asks, does Mary hear our thoughts? I don't always have the opportunity to say a rosary out loud. It's silent in my head. I have wondered if she knows.
Well, the church doesn't address this question in the depth I'm about to specifically, but the standard Catholic understanding is, Mary knows what you're praying, even if you're praying silently. The question would be, how does she know that? And there are different possibilities. One possibility is, well, she's in heaven, she's glorified, she's in her resurrected form, so she's got glorified resurrection abilities. Maybe she's just telepathic enough that she knows what everyone in the world is asking her about in prayer, whether it's out loud or silent. That's entirely possible. We don't know what limitations humans are going to have in their glorified resurrected state. We are told we're going to be like Jesus. And if Jesus has the ability in his glorified
I know, Jim.
And in his resurrected, glorified human. Yeah, see, we'll talk about that. But since he has a human intellect in his glorified form, if he's able to know our requests in his human intellect without just downloading them from his divine intellect, then Mary would presumably have the same kind of abilities in her glorified form. On the other hand, let's suppose that she doesn't have that kind of robust telepathy. Well, the standard opinion is that all of the saints, not just Mary, but even the ones that don't currently have glorified bodies, they also know our requests for them. And the standard opinion historically has been that God lets them know that part of the happiness of those in heaven is having all knowledge that's relevant to them, that there would be something, less than optimal in heaven if there was knowledge that was relevant to you that you didn't know about. And since those in heaven have been perfected in love, they're going to want to pray for those who want their prayers. That would be the loving thing to do. And so they would want to know about people who are asking for their prayers. And so God lets them know. And so he serves, if I can put it this way, as a kind of internet router in heaven, because God knows he knows everything in his divine intellect. And so he can just tell a saint, hey, there's this person that wants your intercession. So one way or another, the saints are aware of our prayers, and we have biblical evidence that they're aware of that. I've done some work on that on the Jimmy Akin podcast and on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. But fundamentally, they're aware of our prayers, even when they're silent, because God loves them and he loves us. And even if they couldn't on their own hear our prayers when they're silent, God would let them know. I mean, they couldn't on their own. Most of them, they're not here in the room. They're not hearing sound waves from our voices. So it doesn't really matter whether we speak out loud or whether we say it in our heart. They're not here with their ears to hear us. Mm-hmm. So they're going to need to get that information some other way. And it's possible they could get it on their own if they have robust telepathy. It's also possible that God can give it to them because he knows what we're saying, whether it's out loud or in our hearts.
Suzanne, thank you. I hope that was helpful to you. Jimmy Akin, our guest, has asked me anything. All the questions are in from the internet. This one comes from Dave. Does Genesis 1, verse 30, really mean all animals were originally vegetarians, as many fundamentalists claim?
Okay, so we need to start by reading the text, and here's what Genesis 1:30 says. God is talking, and he says, to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. So that means that the animals are authorized to eat green plants, but does that imply that they're only authorized to eat green plants? Well, I think that that is one way of taking the text, because the same thing is true of man at this point. And God has given to humans the ability to eat plants at this point, since Adam was the gardener of Eden. Later, when Noah becomes the zookeeper of the ark, he's given, after the flood, the right to eat meat. And so it looks like the principle is whatever you're making a living from, you get to enjoy the fruits of that. So if you're a gardener, you get to eat plants. If you're a zookeeper, you get to eat meat. And only this is being done collectively. So after mankind initially assumed the control of the Earth's flora, we got to eat from the flora, and after he assumed control of the world's animals, he got to eat from the world's animals. And so I think that this is something that the author of Genesis is depicting for us. It's like humans and animals were originally given authorization to be vegetarian, and humans at least are later given authorization to eat meat. But that's how it's presented in literary terms. That's different than what's actually true. And one of the things that the church acknowledges is that the early chapters of Genesis, specifically the first 11, contain simple metaphorical language that is not to be taken literally. And this is not a modern idea. This is something that, like Pope Pius XII talked about in 1950. He says that these first 11 chapters contain simple metaphorical language used to express basic truths to a people but little cultured, even though they do relate in some way to our history. So I would say with Thomas Aquinas that the nature of the animals has not changed. So animals that are obligate carnivores today, like lions and tigers, would have been obligate carnivores before the fall. They don't have the apparatus physically to eat plants and survive. They have to eat meat in order to survive. And I would say that that Genesis doesn't go into that. You know, there's also no place where where God says, "Oh, and I give all the animals or certain of the animals permission to eat meat now." I think that that's just not on his mind map. The author of Genesis, it's not on his mind map trying to explain that. So I think he says what he says in Genesis 1:30 as a literary way of conveying a lesson about what you care for as your work. That's what you get to eat from. And he extends that to the animals here, perhaps to portray a picture of the pre-fallen world as one where there was harmony and nobody got eaten. But I don't think I think that's a literary device, and we're not meant to take the resultant implications as if they were literal.
Dave, thank you for the question. Thank you for everybody who sent questions in. If you'd like to send questions into the future, Jimmy collects them up for us. If you get them to us here at the radio department, radio@catholic.com, we send them on to Jimmy. If you find Jimmy online, you can send them to him. And the internet has a lot of questions, but we'd like to get yours. So if you have them, send them. Jimmy Akin, thank you very much. I always enjoyed the 2 hours with you.
My pleasure.
That will certainly do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.